This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi. We got very ambitious this morning, and we decided to embark on a topic which is very intriguing, very controversial, and at first I thought we'd be able to cover it in one day. Then I realized that it would take even more than one day just to make the photocopies. And then I decided to do something that I never did before. Usually I have the whole topic mapped out, I have all the photocopies made, and even if it'll take us 2 or 3 weeks, okay, so be it. Now we don't even have all the photocopies made. There are still a lot of sheets over here that need to be cut and paste, but we have enough to more than begin. And okay, this is the question that's on everyone's mind. Okay, we're not going to beat around the bush. If Shlomo said, no beating around the bush, we're going to cut to the chase. Okay, you ready for this question? Who's better? Ashkenazim or Sefardim? That's the question. And after we answer that question, we want to know who knows how to read Lashon HaKodesh better? Who's reading Lashon HaKodesh better? So the first question, in terms of Ashkenazim and Sefardim, we know Rabbi Vayeira, Zechatzak Levracha, was a big proponent, L'chu el Yosef, Kol Asher Yomar, Ta'asa. Whatever he says, you have to do. That Sefardim should follow the psak of the Beis Yosef, Maran Bet Yosef. But the question is, what about when it comes to Kiddushin, when it comes to marriage? There's certain things that the Beis Yosef is lenient about, and the Ramah is machmer. So our Sefardim are allowed to be lenient and rely on the Beis Yosef, even when it comes to Edus, even when it comes to Kiddushin, and the answer is no. That even though Sefardim are always rely on Beis Yosef, nevertheless, not when it comes to marriage. When it comes to marriage, they have to adopt the chumras of the Ramah. Why? Why? So we have here an amazing tshuva. Tshuva of the Beis Ridvaz, Rabbi Yaakov Volovsky. Rabbi Yaakov Volovsky authored the Ridvaz on Yerushalmi. You open up Yerushalmi, you see the parish of the Ridvaz. So you think he lived, 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago. He lived in Sfas about 100 years ago. And then he was a rabbi in Chicago. And he was a rabbi in New York. The Ridvaz. Not the Radvaz, the Rabbi of the Arizal, the Ridvaz. Now, I don't have the date on me, but the Ridvaz wrote an amazing tshuva. He says, let's see if you can figure that out. Masha'en Kain. He says like this. Beplugta behilchos edus gufa. If you have a machlokes when it comes to edus, im zeh chashav edus oiloi, bazeloi tuchlu lahakel. Sefardim are not allowed to be lenient and rely on the mechaber. Why? Ki kol yisrael mechutanim zelazeh. Because we intermarry. Ashkenazim and Sefardim marry each other. And we know when we had machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, what's the halacha? Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, if they would want to marry each other, they would have to tell each other if they relied on a leniency that the other party didn't hold of. Beis Shammai Beis Hillel moidiyim uparshi kedisa b'gemara. Avo kivan deloy moidiyim. But nowadays, that nobody's going to tell their counterpart. No Ashkenazi is going to tell the Sefardi. No Sefardi is going to tell an Ashkenazi, yes, I relied on a certain kula. Ashkenazim and Sefardim may not rely on any kula that the other party doesn't hold of when it comes to marriage. V'anachnu kulanu mishadchem einenu. We marry each other. Ashkenazim and Sefardim marry. So tzrichim atem lahachmer kedas harama. Sefardim must be strict and follow the Ramah. Why? Ki kulanu b'nei avos hakdoshim. We're all the descendants of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Ve'in lasos richuk beinenu b'nyanei hashiduchim. Says the Ridvaz, this concept, Ashkenazim only marry Ashkenazim, Sefardim, it's nonsense. It's nonsense. No, we should not make any separation when it comes to Shidduchim. Ki kroivim anachnu. We're related. Atzneinu, b'sareinu kulanu. We're all flesh and blood. So, I asked the Ridvaz, so why Ashkenazim, they wear their Ashkenazic clothing, and Sefardim, they wear their Sephardic clothing. I thought we're all brothers. So why are we wearing different garments? Why Ashkenazim wear their Western clothing, and the Sefardim wear their Oriental Eastern clothing? Why? He says, simple reason. Because of the passing of time. Because the galus has been so long. So we started wearing different clothing. Ba'aksav ha'lashon, especially the way we write and the way we speak. Ki nispazarn ba'amnesena rabim b'chol kitzvei teva, we're scattered to all ends of the world. Zel mizrach, b'zem l'marav, v'nizbalbalu ha'lashonos shel chol. The same way, you go to Poland, you go to Germany, or you go to Spain, you go to Iran, Iraq, and so forth. Every country has its language, and that language affects the dialect of the way Lashon HaKodesh is spoken. So, the only reason Ashkenazim and Sefardim speak a different type of Hebrew is only because of the influence of the places they were exiled to. Now the Ritva says something very important in parentheses, okay, and this is what we're getting to. But bottom line, who speaks Hebrew better, Ashkenazim or Sefardim? Who's pronouncing the words more correct? Says the Ritva. V'karov loymar shehamivta shel lashon hakodesh etzlechem. Says Ritva, it's very plausible, it's very likely that the pronunciation of Hebrew by the Sefardim Mesukenes Yoser is more correct. Okay? The Ritva says, the way the Sefardim, what we call Havara Sefardit, says the Ritva is more correct. Why? Because the Ashkenazim were chased from Germany to Poland to Lithuania to Russia to England to France. And the Sefardim, very often, they stay in their country for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Golos, right? Al Kain, therefore, says the Ritva, Yesh lahamin shehamivta shel lashon hakodesh. We're going to be using the word mivta very often. The word mivta means the pronunciation, the accent of lashon hakodesh by the Sefardim mesukenes harbe yoser. Aval zulazeh, but besides the way Hebrew is pronounced, ein shum hevdel beinenu klal. There is no difference whatsoever. Ki kulanu oivdim lekel echad. We all serve one God. Umachzikim v'Torah Akdosha, and we all believe in the Torah. Torah shebachsav, Torah shebapeh, umeshadchen beinenu. We marry each other. Therefore, says the Ritva, that when it comes to any halachic issues dealing with marriage, everyone has to be machmir on the chumras of both. So Sefardim have to follow Ramah, and vice versa. Al-Kain b'nei plukta, b'nei yishus, ha'masavim zeh, yesh lahachmir. And says the Ritva, Hashem she'av rachmanas on us, send us Eliyahu Hanavi, gather us all to Eretz Yisrael, and then we'll all rejoice, v'shalom al Yisrael. Okay? So Ritva is saying, bottom line, who pronounces the words more correctly? Says the Ritva, probably the Sefardim. Okay. Rav Henkin was the Paisek in America before Rav Moshe, right? Rav Henkin, the Gedolei Olam. He writes even more. Not only do Sefardim pronounce the words more correctly, Ashkenazim are required to change the way they pronounce Hebrew and pronounce the words like Sefardim. So you say, how are they going to do that? That you don't believe you have to get new glass, right?
No.
So says Rav Henkin, the teachers in the yeshivas need to be trained, and this way the children will be able to pick up the way the Sefardim pronounce words. Says Rav Henkin, for 1,000 years in Europe, you never heard any Gadol b'Yisrael say, did you ever hear the Vilna Gaon, Noida B'Yehuda, Chassam Sofer say, let's go pick up the way the Sefardim pronounce the words? Says Rav Henkin, of course not. You know why? Because when you're living in Poland, you're living in Russia, where the language is very primitive, and there are no sounds that children are taught. The doesn't exist. Ja doesn't exist. So to start to teach them the correct way to pronounce Hebrew would be impossible. Yeah. But now that we're in America, and the American and English language has very subtle sounds that can be mimicked in Hebrew. So now that we're in America, we're required to take advantage of the opportunity and make sure that all Ashkenazim abandon their incorrect pronunciations and pronounce Lashon HaKodesh like Sefardim.
But the Sefardim understand the Rabbi of the he was done.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna get to that.
So why this rule is not applied to the yeshivas today?
Oh, so we'll see why. We'll see why. We'll see why.
Wait.
Says the Rav Henkin in the Eilis Yisrael. Yeah, and Rabbi, if you have any strong feelings about this, and if you can get all emotional about it, so then, this shiur is not for you. Okay? We're here to be open-minded and objective to the halachic issue.
Yep.
Says Rav Henkin, Yaduahu, Sheha'avara ha'ashkenazis chaserahi. It is well known that the way Ashkenazim pronounce Hebrew is lacking. Habituyim hanachonim l'kameyosis. It's lacking in the correct pronunciation of many letters. For example, ayin mizvatis anuka aleph. Ashkenazim, we pronounce ayin like aleph. But so why did the Rebbeinu Shem have to create two letters? We have a kasha. Why did the Rebbeinu Shem have to create two letters if ayin and aleph are the same? Or tuf and tes are the same? Or saf and samach are the same. By the way, we're not just going to go after the Ashkenazim today, so don't feel comfortable. But right now we're starting with the Ashkenazim, right? So the saf and the samach. Havez harafuya kevav. We don't differentiate between the vez and the vav, or the kuf and the kaf, or the ches and the chaf. And everybody knows, says Rav Henkin, these are different sounds. Each one is distinguished. There's a difference between an ayin and an aleph. There's a difference between a taf and a tes. There's a difference between a saf and a samach. But by the Sefardim, those great Sefardim, they know what they're doing. They pronounce an aleph and an ayin differently, a taf and a tes differently, a saf and a samach differently. But that's letters. What about when it comes to nekudos? When it comes to nekudos, va'amnam bedavar she'ein mevurar, something that we're not clear about, kamay b'shnei miftah hatnuos, like different nekudos. Ein lanu rishus hashanis b'Torah tefillah minusach anusam ha'avar lavar. If you're not sure how to pronounce a nekuda, and you're going to say, well, I'm not sure, I'm going to switch to the Sefardim. Sefardim are not any better. They don't know either. So if it's something that there's uncertainty about, so just you keep on doing what you're doing. Aval b'chol ha'nizkar. But when it comes to letters, sheha'avarahu Ashkenazi lukuya vadai, says Rav Henkin, when it comes to letter pronunciation, where the Ashkenazim are certainly in error, halai havadai shel Sefardim tzarich la'achriya. Then you need to follow what the Sefardim are doing. Listen to what he says. V'haya toiv, I have a great idea, he says. Shehamoyrim ha'Ashkenazim, all the Rabbeim in yeshivas, Yislamdu habitoy hanachon shel oisiyos me'amar ma'Sefardim. They should go to Sefardim and be trained how to pronounce the Holy Tongue. Meaning don't start with the kids. First start with the teachers. Because if teachers don't know how to read Hebrew, you can be sure the children won't know how. And once the teachers are trained, uvazeh hanakal, look what he writes, unbelievable. Hanakal le'eslamid zeh bekan me b'Yeruba. It would be much easier in America to train kids to pronounce Lashon HaKodesh than in Europe. Levad, first of all, in Europe, you go to Poland, you know how finding a Sephardi is like, there are no Sephardim going around in the Shtetlach in Poland. There are no Sephardim in right? So where are you going to get a Sephardi from? Levad mashim mitzvim b'kan Yehudim b'kol Medinas b'alei ha'chavaros hashon z'yomdu zeh mizeh hinei Berussia u Poland. The Russian language, the Polish language, the language is very primitive. The sounds are very basic. You're not going to have sounds in that language to assist us in teaching proper Hebrew. But the English language, there are a lot of subtle sounds. From the time the kid is 1.5 past the, they could say the. For example, Azkir bezeh chilukim yeduim lemedaktikim be'ein elu ma'esis hanal. I'm going to say the clear differences between these letters. Ayin. How do you pronounce an ayin? Mivta hanachain ke'alef. The ayin sounds like an aleph. Hanidchak el hachech. But with the aleph stuck to the palate. Aleph. Right? V'karov l'ches, it's a little bit like a ches. V'lekuf ma'ad, and a little bit like a kuf. Anyone want to go for that? Anyone want to try that?
Any speech therapy?
Okay. Yeah. V'chein miftam harbe me'asfardim. There are many Sefardim who pronounce it correctly. Many who don't, but many who do. Tes the gush.
Please, don't push me.
Yeah? Tes tough the gusha, a tough. Mizbataz kishmagim k'tzah lashon ben Hashem. A tough is different than a tes. A tough is like with a little bit of a th sound. V'ukein ois the English. V'chein saf refuya la'ashkenazim. Mevatim ois kisamach k'shaloshen ben Hashem. The correct way to pronounce a saf is not s, it's
Tough.
a little bit, it's like an S with a lisp. Vav is like an aleph and a little bit of a vav. What's an aleph with a little bit of a vav? W. Whoa. W, but English. It took me a long time to know what Dalet, Aleph, Beis, Ayin, Lamed, Yud, Vav was. W. Right? That's right. You want to know President Bush in Hebrew? Right, there you go. Okay. Uva, uveis, refuya Ashkenazim. Ulamikta zan ka'is V. A vase is like a V. Kuf. Kuf is pronounced of bitush aleph im kuf. Ches is a hay with a ches. Says Rav Henkin. Move on. We see from here shekol ela ef shelavar b'ksav levad. For me to write out how to pronounce the letters is very difficult. V'tzarch shmiya ba'aznayim behargo. What you need to do is you need to hear it. You need to get accustomed to it. Aval kedai hadavar. It is worthwhile for Ashkenazim to learn to pronounce Hebrew correctly. B'chdei shehaTorah v'atfilah shalanu tei kriyasim meduyekes. So that we could pronounce Hebrew correctly. Says Rav Henkin. A Hebrew letter is like a guf. The nekuda is like the neshama. But if the guf is dirty, is the guf ma'as, what is the neshama going to do? So says Rav Henkin, the first thing we need to do is we need to make sure the guf is clean. How do you make sure the guf is clean? Tell the Sefardim to teach us how to pronounce the letter. And once they do that, then we could try to add the neshama. So you what? Yeah.
Can you imagine how he must have felt hearing that?
Okay.
Where was it from?
From I believe Russia.
I know.
I mean, why?
Rabbi Sai.
Phonetics.
Rabbi Sai. Did anybody ever do this? Did any Gadol B'Yisrael, any Ashkenazic Gadol B'Yisrael ever change over to Havara Sefardic? Definitely yes. Who? One of the greatest achronim in the history of Klal Yisrael. The Rabbi of the Chassam Sofer. You ready for this? This is one of the most astounding things I've ever heard. I just got a sefer. Somebody came over to me that there was a library. It had an extra sefer. They didn't know what to do it if I want it. I said, yeah, of course I want it. It was a biography of Rav Nosson Adler. Okay? In the sefer Derech HaNesher, in Ois Nun Aleph. Now, the first thing you have to know Rav Nosson Adler did is he switched over from Nusach Ashkenaz to Nusach Sfard. Okay? We had a whole share on that. Rabbeinu hispalel benusach uvesider ho'arizah. Now the Chassam Sofer didn't. Chassam Sofer held Ashkenaz, Nusach Ashkenaz was better. Chassam Sofer held Nusach Ashkenaz was better. It was more authentic. But the Nosson Adler switched over for Kabbalistic reasons. Behirgel l'shoinoi gamkein ledaber b'mivta Sefardi tahar. Rav Nosson Adler trained himself to speak Lashon Kodesh like a Sefardi. Very interesting. And in the biography of the Chassam Sofer, it also writes in the Chud HaMeshulash, Tfilasai haisa mitachsidur ha'ari. Rav Nosson Adler in Pei. What's Pei? Frankfurt am Main in Germany. He davened Nusach Arizal, Benusach Sfard. Okay. And then in the footnote, in the Chud HaMeshulash, it gives you a little bit of historical background of how he learned to speak like a Sefardi. But for that, we're going to look at number 6 for a moment. One of the great Sefardic poskim of this century, Rav Avadia Haidaya. Shalas Tshuvos Hadaya. Yaskil Avdi. Shabbos was Yaskil Avdi. He says, where did Rav Nosson Adler learn how to speak like a Sefardi? Of course. He wrote a letter to Eretz Yisrael, and he imported a Sefardic Talmud Chacham to come to his house and to teach him Lashon Kodesh like a Sefardi. His name was Reb Chaim Moidoi, the Mechaber, the Sefer Chaim La'olam. And it took Rav Nosson Adler 2 to 3 years to learn how to pronounce Hebrew like a Sefardi. You ever hear something like this in your life? The Rav Nosson Adler, the Gadol Hadar, imports Reb Chaim Moidoi from Yushalayim. It didn't take him a day. I would think, okay, I'll start speaking like a Sefardi, W, all of that stuff. That'll take me a day or two. No, it took him 3 years. Now, he could learn Shas in 3 minutes. Right? And it took him 3 years to speak Lashon Kodesh.
It was really himself.
What? Frankfurt, in Germany. He was the Rebbe of the Chassam Sofer. So the Shas Shows Yaskal Avdi writes, look what he writes, about 10 lines down, V'davar echad agleil, let me reveal to you something. Ki agoyin HaKadosh, Rav Nosson Adler, Rabbi Chassam Sofer, hispalel benusach ha'arizal, v'hirgil l'shoynai gamkein ledaber b'mifta Sefardi tar. He trained himself to speak Hebrew like a Sefardi. V'hayu mispal gamkein b'mifta Sefardi. The Hagoyin HaKadosh, Reb Chaim Moidoi, Mechaber Sefer Chaim La'olam, Haya Etzlei Beis Shanim L'Tachlis Zeh. People learn how to become a moyal in a month. Okay? Think about that. Right? And it took him 2 years. We'll see by some accounts 3 years. To learn L'Shei Yilma Mimen Miftah Sardis. Fine. So what do we do with that? That would seem clear that, like Rav Henkin is saying, that an Ashkenazi should switch over and speak Lashon Kodesh like Sefardi. However, if you look in the footnote in the Chod HaMeshulash, he brings down from the Sefer TorahAnytime, from the Goin, Rav Avram Lavenstam, the Avbezdin of Emden, in a Kunshas he wrote, Neginoisi Nenagin. He writes like this: Ma she'idu ala gon ha'chazim reinu Rav Nosson Adler b'Frankfurt shem misagam mivta Sefardi. That which they claim. The Rav Nosson Adler spoke Hebrew like a Sefardi. Gam ani yodati ha'chashu. I know that. Should be Yosef v'Kalkosh Frankfurt domain bebeis Admar agoyin ha'chazim reinu Rav Pinchas. When I Number five. When I was in Frankfurt by the house of Rav Pinchas who? The other Gadol Hadar of the time, Rav Pinchas Horowitz, the Hafla, Bal Hafla, V'Amakne. His Balalti Lufam Gaming Beis Agon HaChosim Rein Rav Nosson. I davened in Rav Nosson Adler's house. V'Shematiu Mispal B'Mifta Sefardi. And in Germany, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Rav Nosson Adler davened like a Sefardi. By the way, Rav Nosson Adler, Mamish, was one of the greatest Mekubalim who ever lived. One time he was together with Chassam Sofer and they were chasing after him and they said a shame and they disappeared. They disappeared. Rav Nosson Adler was when the Chassam Sofer heard that somebody said about Rav Nosson Adler that he was a Malach Hashem, Chassam Sofer says it's Lashon Hara. Malach Hashem. Don't downplay Rav Nosson Adler. He was much greater than a Malach Hashem. Amnam, hu gadli mikam l'gidei emes be'emes, says the TorahAnytime, it was told to me from very trustworthy reports, shehachased analzal hisachsin bebeisoi ish echad. He didn't have a cholam how to speak like a Sefardi. He invited a Sefardi misham shnasayim yomim ashalosh, 2 or 3 years. Ach l'tach lezeh. Imagine, they came to Rav Nosson Adler. No, we're waiting for the Gemara here. Sorry, I'm busy. What are you busy with? I'm learning how to read Lashon HaKodesh. From who? From a Sefardi. Can you imagine what was going on back then? So should we emulate what Rav Nosson Adler did? No way. You're going to start making analogies from Rav Nosson Adler? And he said the following: if it took Rav Nosson Adler 3 years to learn how to read like a Sefardi, then you know how long it's going to take us?
20 years.
3 million years, right? With his memory, by the way, Rav Nosson Adler did not write any chidushim. You know why? He held it was an Isser Dairaisa. Why? Because the only reason you're allowed to write down Torah Shabbal Peh is because he might forget it. But for him it didn't apply, so he wasn't allowed to write down anything. He only made dots. So there's someone who davens in the shul that has a Sefer HaIkrim with the dots of Rav Nosson Adler. I saw his handwriting. Someone here who davens. He bought the Sefer HaIkrim with the Hagoyis of Rav Nosson Adler. Right? We're not even zoicha to be the foot mat. Rav Nosson Adler wouldn't even wipe his mud on our. If we would be a mat, Rav Nosson Adler would say that we're not roy, that he should wipe his mud on our feet. And he says, how long would that take us? The Hafla was around, and the Hafla continued to make brachos like an Ashkenazi. So he obviously didn't agree with the Rav Nosson Adler. Nobody else agreed with Rav Nosson Adler. Everyone else continued to speak Lashon Kodesh the way they always did. There was the Baal Hafla, who was the Goyin Hagoyinim, Chassid Shebechasidim, Mekubal Shebemekubalim, and there was Reb Zalman Chassid, and many other Gedolim, and they didn't follow what Reb Nosson Adler did, and therefore, just because he did it, it doesn't mean we should do it.
Just for there was another Nosson Adler who was chief rabbi in London in the 19th century.
Okay. But we're talking about Nosson Adler of Frankfurt, okay? Now that we spoke about how great the Sefardim were, and how the Ashkenazim don't know how to read Hebrew, but we're going to take it out on them now. And that is the Magen Avraham. Now, right, so the question is, are you allowed to switch? Are you allowed to switch? So the Magen Avraham in Siman Samach Ches, he quotes a Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says like this. Look at number 7. V'zel Shon HaGemara Yerushalmi. Af al pi sheshalchanoi sheshalachnu lechem. Thank you. Even though I sent to you Seder HaTfilos, the order of prayer, the order of davening, al tishanu mi minhag avaisechem. Don't change from your minhag. The question is, what does the Yerushalmi mean? The Yerushalmi says, even though I'm giving to you exactly the order, Baruch Sha'amar, Haidu, Nizmal Sadi, Hichavayid, but don't change from your father's minhag. Presumably what that means is, even though you know what to daven, but however you say it, however you pronounce it, don't change. That may be saying that doesn't matter who's right and who's wrong. You're not allowed to change. Okay. And now we come to this week's Parsha. Okay? Parshas Vayeira. Okay? Vayoimar. And he said. Who said? I'm going to read the whole pasuk. Vayoimar Adonai imna matzasi chen ve'enecha al na sa'avar me'al avdecha. And he said, Adoi, and then Noi. My master, please, if I have found favor in your eyes, don't leave me. Rashi is bothered by the following question. The word Aleph Daled Nun Yud is Lashon Yachid or Lashon Rabim?
Yachid.
Rabim.
Rabbi.
My masters. That's what the word means.
It's not Adoni, it's
Hashem, right? Imno mazachein bi'einecha. So he should have said Adoi and then Noi. Imno mazachein bi'einechem.
Couldn't it be Adonai?
So 1 second. So says Rashi, who is Abraham talking to? Ligadol shebehem amar. Rashi says he's talking to the greatest among them. The karam kulam adonim. He's calling them all my masters. But he's saying to the oldest one, Al nasavar, don't leave. B'kimin shelo yavarhu, and if he doesn't go, yamdu chaver avimai. In other words, he's saying, my masters, you're all my masters, but he's saying to the greater one, stay here, and then if you stay, everyone else will stay. Uvelashan zeh, and reading it this way, hu chayil. Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud, is secular. He's not talking to God, he's talking to these people. Davar acher, another pshat, kodesh. It's holy. He's talking to the Rebbeinu Shalom. V'haya oimer, lahakadosh baruch hu, lahamtin la, he's asking Hashem, wait for me, ad sheyarotz v'yachnes es ha'archim, until he goes and gathers the guests from where Chazal derive, gadol, hachnasas, archim, yoiser mehakmalas pnei hashchina. Rashi says, then it should have said, he ran after this pasuk. Why did it say in the previous pasuk he ran? Sometimes psukim are out of order. So Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud could either mean secular, chol, or it can mean kodesh. By the way, does anybody know? How do you know when Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud is secular? And how do you know when it's kodesh? So we come to a very important Rabbeinu B'chai.
What is it?
Rabbeinu B'chai tells us, look on the third line, in number 10. Rabbeinu B'chai, one of the classic Rishonim, he was a Rishon who was also a Baal Kabbalah. Chassam Sofer writes that for 40 years, every Friday night, he learned Rabbeinu B'chai al Torah, and he always found new chidushim. On the third line, Rabbeinu B'chai writes that even though technically you could read the pasuk, it's lashon chayil, aval mibnei shemitzanuhu kamotz v'chal asfarim. But because there's a kamas under the nun, noi, yesh lanu loymar shu kaidesh. We should say that this is the name of Hashem. In other words, says Rabbeinu B'chai, Nai is my master. Adonai is what the taxi driver tells you when you walk into the taxi. And Aleph Dalet, and then Noi is what? The name of Hashem. Says Rabbeinu B'chai, let me tell you something about Nekudais. Okay? It's very important, Rabbeinu B'chai. V'tam, now you're going to understand why when it's Noi, it's the name of God, and when it's Nai, it's the name of a regular person. Once heard, the difference between a kamatz and a patach. Very big difference. Here you have a guy, he's depressed, he's down, he's desolate. What do we call him? Neshama. Neshama. He's empty, he's desolate. And you give him a little chizuk, you put that one little pillar under him, now he's neshama. You see the difference it makes? You take somebody who has desolation, and you give him a soul. But it's also even bigger. Says Rabbeinu B'chai. Now, one Rabbeinu B'chai was a proud Sefardi. Okay? So you have to know where this is coming from. V'tam heyois Hashem hazeh kamatz, kishu kodesh yaduhu. The reason why God's name has a kamatz is well known. Ulefi hapshat b'chachmas hanekudais. If you know anything about vowelization, ha-kamatz maila gedola. The kamatz is very great. The sound, the not the sound is very great. The risha and l'shiva tnois, it's the first vocalization, which are kamatz, patach, tserei, right? I don't know, even Ashkenazim, they have a problem with the tserei. Mekabes nilchei amo Yisrael. I don't know, what's Yisrael? Yisrael. Okay. So tserei. Segoel is Chaylam is I. Shuruk is I, is U. Chirik, I. Ki mitoich shivasam, from the 7 vocalizations, Tibane v'sikainen haTorah. The Torah stands on. V'hein hanikram shiva havarais. These are the 7 enunciations. Or the 7 koilos with which the Torah was given. If you look in Parak Chavtes of Tehillim, Mizmor LeDavid, Havul Hashem Anei Elim, Kol Hashem Al Hamayim, Koil. Koil, 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 koil. 7 koilos. What are the 7 koilos? A, E, I, U, E. He says like this. Shiva kol shalem amar David b'mizmar shamatan Torah. Shiva koilos. L'fi shekol haTorah miyusedes aleim. V'zeu pshat ha'maimar. B'shiva koilos nitna. This is what Chazal mean. The Torah was given with 7 koilos. Ba'aleim amar shloimai. Chatzva amudeha Shiva. The Gemara in Shabbos says, Chatzva Amadeh Shiva is there's 7 books in the Torah. Bereishis Shemais Vayikra, Bamidbar before Vayehi ben Saya, Bamidbar after Vayehi and Devarim. Says Rabbeinu B'chai, it also refers to the 7 Nekudais. And listen to what he says. Ki heim ho amudim asher kol habayis nachon aleim. They are the Nekudos, are the pillars that all Torah stands on. V'hahefresh shabein kamatz lepatach. The difference between a kamatz and a patach, eino ela b'nekuda, is only a dot. Because you look in the old Chumashim and old Sidurim, a patach is a vav, a horizontal vav. A kamatz is a vav with a dot under it. Not the way they make it a horizontal line and a vertical line. It was a horizontal line and a dot. Right? If you look at anything, even when I was a kid, it was a horizontal line, a dot. Nowadays, everything is computerized. So it's horizontal line. By the way, and it has to be a dot. Because Nekudais have gematria. You know that? A chirik is a yud, and a dot is a yud, is 10. Seirei is 20. Segel is 30. Chaylam is 10. Kubutz is 10. Patach is a vav, is 6. Kamatz is a vav and a yud, is 16. And the Shla even writes, in certain words in Berchas Hamazayin, we say it incorrectly to be able to get to certain gematrias. For example, Tamid lo chasar lanu, it should say V'al yechaser lanu. But we say V'al yechsar lanu. Because the gematria of the nekudos of yechsar is lechem. So we intentionally mispronounce the word because of the consideration of the numerical value of the nekudos. Okay? So it's very interesting. Look what he writes. And a yud, the nekuda, which is a dot, which is like a yud, is a remez to lenekudas hametzios, the dot of existence that refers to the 10 spheros. Okay, let's skip a little bit here. He gets a little spooky, and let's just. He says that the nekuda, which is a yud, he talks about the heichal hakodesh, which is the mikdash shamal. He says like this: "V'alkein hanekuda mishameshes l'shiva panim." A dot could have 7 sounds. You put it on top of the ice, chaylam. In the middle of the ice, shura. Next to a patach, kamatz. Next to an e, it becomes a. Next to an a, it becomes e. Next to a shva, kubutz. And then, says Rabbeinu Bechaye, you know what else a dot could do? It could change one letter to another letter. For example, v'oid v'oisiyos atzman. You put a dot by a hey, what does the hey become? A ches. You stuff up the opening of the hay with the dot, it's a ches. You take a vav, you put a dot, becomes a zayin. You take a chaf, and you put a dot on the bottom right, a beis. You take a nun, you put a dot, a gimel. You take a reish, it becomes a dalid. Says Rabbeinu Bechaye. Okay, this is a rishon. B'lachei lakach ha'moisif nekuda. If you add a dot, oigoira machriv es ha'olam, you're destroying the world. So you say, who cares how you pronounce it? What's the difference? Hashem loves me anyway. That might be true, but you're machriv es ha'olam. Umekatzitz netiyos hatar v'shosha. You're uprooting the Torah. Says Rabbeinu Bechaye. Even though you would say, it's all the same. Utnua achas ein adavar kain. Ela sheyesh hefresh beinam b'mifta. Says Rabbeinu Bechaye, the Sefardi, there is a clear difference between patach and kamatz. And if you don't make that difference, all you're doing is destroying the world. That's it. That's it. Sharei tnuas hakamatz gavaya ve'elyana. A kamatz is very supreme, very lofty. Utnuas hapatach lamata. And a patach is lower. Says Rabbeinu Bechaye, the a sound means it's an important word. An a sound means it's not that important. For example, how do you say a box in Hebrew? Aron. Aron. With an a. Aron. Well, how do you say aroin habris? Why is it aroin and aroin habris? Because a word that's strong enough to stand by itself is a kamatz. Aroin. A word that's weak and has to be a construct, has to be described by another word, is aroin, aroin habris. Okay? For example, malach. Vayishach malach. The malach stands by himself. Malach habris. It's with a patach. Why? Because the malach needs the bris. Always means the word is important. Means it's not that important. Means the word can't stand by itself. And that is why, Rabbi say. That is why. Whenever a word appears at the end of a pasuk, or by an asnachta, it's Whenever it appears in the middle of a pasuk, it's You ever notice? Mordechai, Vayavar, Mordechai. If it's by an asnachta, it's Mordechai. Vayeira Mordechai, right? If it's in the middle of the word, it's always ah. People always say, oh, when is it ah, when is it ah? They memorize it. You have nothing to memorize. If it's Mitzrayim, Mitzrayim, right? There's nothing to memorize. If it's the end of the Pasuk, if it's the last word of a sentence, or the last word of a phrase, it's always ah. If it's the middle of a phrase, it's always ah. There's no exception.
Mordechai is a name. Why should it change at all?
Because if it's given the importance of being the final word, then it's given more chashivas. By the way,
even if that's not his name.
That's his name when it appears at the end. That's how you say the name. The way you say the name when it appears at the end. Mashiv haruach umayrid.
Agash.
That's a good
No,
Depends.
Oh, it depends whether that's the end of a phrase or Mashvach Mar Agashem Mechalka Chaim Bechesed. Says Rav Moshe Feinstein, Mashiv haruach umayrid ha Goshem. Soif Pasuk. Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky says Mashvach Mar Hageshem Mechalka Chaim Bechesed. But there are no exceptions, and when there are, there's a whole Torah why there's an exception.
Geffen.
Somebody wrote a statement just on that.
Yeah.
Rabbi Ratzko decided like Rabbi Kamenetsky.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
Rabbi Glatstein, there's a big difference. You know, what you're saying is very small difference. What I want to say is there's some Hasidim that say...
Oh, I'm not talking about today. We're just talking about Ashkenazim and Sefardim. We're not bringing the Hasidim in.
What do we need? We're Shalbach. There's a very big difference.
Okay, no. But now what we're learning from Rabbeinu Bechai is, you would think and ah is not a big deal. So yes, you're destroying the world. You're machar v'soilam.
Somebody's wrong. When you say between who and e.
Yeah. We're not even know where that's.
Male and a female difference.
Yeah. But now even before that, even the slight difference between a kamatz and a patach, machar v'olam. Machar v'olam. Here, he says, that is why. Look in Gimel. Umitam zeh, benikud zeh Hashem, lo timtza patach. Umitam zeh. Oh, you're about to see. Yeah, you'll see. Because the world stands on the Torah. The Torah is the blueprint of the world. Right? If one letter would be removed from the Torah, existence couldn't stay. So the same way, if a letter would be removed from the Torah, the existence couldn't stay. If a word is mispronounced, you're destroying existence. Right? So he says, "Umitam zeh." Let me continue. "Umitam zeh, benikud zeh Hashem." Whenever you say the name of Hashem, lo timtza patach ela kamatz. You'll never find Hashem's name, Aleph Daled Nun, with a patach. Hashem's name has to be pronounced Vayomer Adonai Imna Matzah Sichein Beinecha Al Nas Harmei Avdecha. Otherwise, you're not saying the name of Hashem. Otherwise, you're saying the name of someone who goes into a taxi.
But if you look at the
Kimala El Yoina Agdoila Hamoira El Yoinais. So therefore, that's what Rabbeinu Bechai says. God's name cannot be the name of the guy who's entering a taxi. There's a difference between Hashem and someone who's taking a cab ride. Okay? There's a difference. So, says Rabbeinu Bechai, V'zehu ha'hefresh ha'gadol sheyesh b'toraseinu bein kamatz l'patach. So Rabbeinu Bechai is saying that his time, the Sefardim did pronounce it correctly. They pronounced the difference between kamatz and patach. Kehefresh, you know what the difference between and is? The difference between day and night. Sheyesh bein or l'choshech bein kodesh l'chol. Says Rabbeinu Bechai, someone who makes an and an the same, has one of the two following problems. Either he's destroying the meaning, or he's a kaifer. Why? Look what he writes. Oy! You don't escape one of two problems. Either you're destroying the meaning, or for example, in this week's Parsha, Avram Avinu says, Ha'af tispeh. Ha'af. Ha'af is Lashon Bidmiyah. Are you going to destroy a tzaddik in Russia? But if you make it Ha'af tispeh, then it's a statement. Hashem, you destroyed tzaddikim in Rishon. Ha is Lashon Bidmiyah. So Ha'af is Avram saying, Hashem, you're not going to do that. Or, for example, there's a pasuk, Hakel Ya'aves Mishpat. It's with a patach. But if you say Hakel, then you're saying God distorts justice. Okay, another factor, very interesting factor, and that is, kamatz means it's true, Patach means it's false. How? For example, if you look in Shmuel Beis, Malvad she'amru oid chachmei hadikduk. The chachmei hadikduk say, Ki hakamatz hu nemar al inyan amiti v'loy ken hapatach. When you want to say something is absolutely true, you use an ah. When you want to say something is false, you use an ah. Umizeh amar hakasav, there's a pasuk in Shmuel, va'amoid alav va'emasasehu. You know what they're talking about? In Shmuel Beis, they came back and they said, I was with Shaul, and the guy said, I stood above him and I killed him. Look what he says. Va'amoid olav, va'amasehu. Now, did this guy kill Shaul? No, Shaul killed himself. So that's why the va'amoid olav is a kamas, because he was standing over him. Va'amasehu is a patach because he was lying through his teeth, because he didn't kill him. Kamatz means absolute. Patach means sheker. So chas v'shalom, to pronounce Hashem's name Ado and then Nai, not only are you making Hashem's name Chayil, you're saying He's not Hashem. Look what he says. Vav shel va'am timseh b'kamas aval vav shel va'am techeh b'patach ki ma she'amar va'am adolav emesu v'lo chen va'amaseo ki shol harges atzmai v'hinei kol zeh mechachmas terasenu halakis u'lashaynenu hakdosha. And that is why the letters are like the body, the nekudas are like the neshama. Don't distort the neshama. And he quotes from the Sefer HaBayer, Damyan nekudasa bi'asvasa da'iraisa de Moshe. Nekudas in the letter of the Torah Moshe, kenishmasa dechayi begufa de'inish, is like the soul of man in a person's body. And then he goes on to a Kabbalistic explanation of Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud, that the Aleph comes from the Shem Ekya, the Yud comes from the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Dalet Nun is the Remez to Midas Hadin, and I'll let you look at that on your own time. But Rabbeinu Bechai is definitely saying, give me a few more minutes, that if you want to pronounce Hashem's name correctly, and you don't want to distort the most important word in the Hebrew language, you better make a difference between ah and ah. So as bad as maybe the Ashkenazim have the letters, but you better make a difference between an ah and an ah sound. Because Rabbeinu Bechai, who we're going to see was one of them, or one of us, whoever you are, is saying that you have to pronounce the difference between an ah and ah. Otherwise, you're macher v'soilam. And that is why Rav Yaakov Emden writes that even though we saw in the Ridvaz that the Sefardim have the pronunciation better, and the Rav Henkin says Ashkenazim need to learn how to pronounce the letters from the Sefardim, but now we have a different thing. That after the Ashkenazim learn how to pronounce the letters from the Sefardim now need to come to us, or to you, and learn how to pronounce Nekudais, ah and ah, especially for the name of Hashem. That's why Rav Yaakov Emden writes, very strong language. And by the way, you don't have to take my word for it. The Ben Ish Chai writes in Baghdad that unfortunately, he says, we don't know how to pronounce the ah and the ah, and we'll see in a moment. But let's take a look at number 10. Says Rav Yaakov Emden, he says on the 4th line that the Aleph and the Hey are different, the Tuf and the Saf and the Samach are different. Not according to the way we do things, we should be ashamed of ourselves. We make the Saf and the Samach the same. But when it comes to Nekuda, says Rabbi Yaakov Emden, Ashreinu v'toiv chalkeinu. Oh, when it comes to Nekuda, happy is our Zlat. Loi kisvardim, not like those Sefardim, she'enam avdilim ben kamatz l'pasach. Uvazeh heimoisim kodesh chayil. They profane the holy. Ulahapech kakash nachshavu tusach. They turn the catapult into straw. V'alzeh tamati miyamai. And says Rabbi Yaakov, I never understood the Sefardim. And Baruch Hashem, I found Rabbeinu Bechai, who was a Sephardi, he also doesn't understand them. And he was one of them. And he warns them. Besides the fact, besides the fact they don't pronounce the chaylim correctly. Didn't God make the chaylim for a reason? And when it comes to laning, then we're definitely better, says Rabbi Yaakov Emden. The comes to the nigun of the trop, we have it correct. Look in the Ben Ish Chai. Ben Ish Chai writes, Upa Yirenu, Baghdad. Baghdad, Ashkenazic or Sefardic city?
Usually Sefardic.
Right? Ba'avonosenu harabim, because of our many sins. Ein lahem yediyah mikolza, we just don't know. Vein melumadim lahafrish bein shva v'tzerei v'sego. We don't know what a shva is, what a tzerei is. A sego. Uvein patach v'kamatz. Hein hayolodim. The kids, of course, they don't know. Hein balei batim. The adults, they don't know either. And not only that, the balei kriya don't know what they're doing either. Hein hachazonim. Hopefully, says the Ben Ish Chai, Hashem Yizbarach, Berachamav, Ya'azreinu, Al Devar Kvod Shemai, V'tachzar Atorah L'yoshna. So who's better? Depends for what? Depends when it comes to letters. Sefardim, no. Comes to Nekudais, Poskim say, especially when it comes to the Shem Hashem, the has to be a chiluk between Kamat and Patach. What about the cholam? What does he mean? He's attacking the Sefardic cholam.
What is the Sefardic cholam?
I have no idea. What?
What's the Ashkenazic cholam?
Machlekes. Either I or O. But
a little bit of a Sefardic children.
okay. But Rabbi say. So now, in terms of, are you allowed to switch? Are you allowed to switch? By the way, we'll just point out, the Minchas Yitzchak is dealing with the following question. You know, after people move to Eretz Yisrael, and there, whether you're Ashkenazi or Sephardi, when you're speaking the language, nobody speaks the language. Ani roitzeh leilech, right? Nobody speaks. You speak the language, b'havara Sephardit, right? Are you allowed to start reading Hebrew that way? Says the Minchas Yitzchak, no way, Jose. He doesn't use that expression exactly, but he says no. You know why? Because modern Hebrew is the worst of both worlds. It takes the worst of the Ashkenazim, the worst of the Sephardim. It abolishes and destroys every kamatz. Everything is and it takes the Ashkenazic pronunciation of the letters. There's no difference between a saf and a samach. There's no difference between an aleph and an ayin. So he writes over here, Va'anan, Manana Abbas. Right, take a look in number 12. And we're just getting started here. We're going to speak more halachically about really whether it's permitted to switch. Whether if you daven in an Ashkenazi shul and you have a Sephardi that davens there, their kid is being bar mitzvah. What do you tell the kid? You can't lane in our shul? Are they allowed to lane in the shul? Are they allowed to lane Parshas Zachar? How do Ashkenazim treat the other Havara? But just one thing, the opinion of the Minchas Yitzchak is, look in this paragraph, Anan, Manana Abbas Rayu, Im Kasvu Kol Zois, Af Keneged HaMivtah Sfardis HaMekubel Satzleim Yavaseim. If you're going to criticize the ancient Sephardic pronunciation, Mikol Sheken, B'nogel HaMivtah HaYisraelis, what we call modern Hebrew, Shalakucha Rak B'miktzas B'amivtah Shalom, which is only taking part of Havara Sfardit, Matzadku B'zedivrei Maskil Al Davar Zeh. How true are the words of a very intelligent person, Ba'amrai. Sha'amivtah ha'ivri ha'modarni, modern Hebrew, ma'ached b'soiche es chesroinen shekol havaris. You know what modern Hebrew is? It takes the faults and the worst part of every dialect, and it created a new language. It doesn't differentiate between a and a, kisfardim. Ves I bitois es hagonius, and they don't differentiate between the aleph and the chaf, kashkenazim. Uman sofin uman rakia navan mimenu rab tuvat tum mivtah shalanu. It's if they wanted to take the best that Ashkenazim had to offer and the best of that, fine. But now you're basically taking the corruptions of both dialects and you're putting it together, chas v'shalom, to switch over to that dialect. But to go from one to the other, or what about if somebody wants to say, I'm going to pronounce the oisios like a Sephardi, I'm going to pronounce the nekudos like an Ashkenazi. Are you allowed to do that? Okay, Rabbi say, have a wonderful day. But we'll end off with what the Radbaz says. We're all the same. Shalom al Yisrael, and hopefully we'll keep the peace until next time.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.